So this is Chris. He'll be talking to us today. He's an Anglican minister and executive director of ISCAST, which is an organisation about Christians in science. And his background is engineering and philosophy, where he teaches at Uni Melbourne. Is that correct?
A little bit.
A little bit, and also
University of Divinity.
Yep, great. So take it away.
Over to me. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you. I had my first maths lectures in 1978 in that, whatever it's called now, because political correctness means you have to change the names of lecture theatres, and this building is no longer the Richard Berry building, right? Because Richard Berry was a man of his time, probably, and I can't remember what Richard Berry did wrong, but anyway, Jacob talked to me about the issue of transhumanism, or AI actually, and I thought that sounded like a very interesting thing, and told him a few people that, or one or two people anyway, that he might ask to talk on it. And they weren't able to do so, and I did indicate that I wouldn't be averse to the idea of sort of finding out, doing a bit of research myself, because, you know, we all know about AI, don't we? We're all pretty familiar with AI. Where's my little AI device? Sorry. What's my AI device? I've got an AI device here anyway. Hey Siri, where am I? Hey Siri, where am I?
You're on our show 5.
Okay, Siri. Hey Siri, tell me what 0 divided by 0 is.
Imagine that you have 0 cookies and you split them evenly among 0 friends. How many cookies does each person get? See, it doesn't make sense. And Cookie Monster is sad that there are no cookies. And you are sad that you have no friends.
Is he right?
Is he right? So, Siri is an example of AI. Artificial intelligence. Siri is not actually intelligent. Siri is artificially intelligent, and that's one of the terms that we're going to have to clarify a bit. So as I was saying, I've done a little bit of research, but I am no expert on this. But given my job as Executive Director of ISCAST, and given that ISCAST is interested in matters that relate Christianity and science, AI, transhumanism, cognitive extension, machine learning are all things that we're very interested in hypothetically, and I'm planning to continue thinking about it. So there may be people here who know more about it than me. Great, let's have a discussion. You can correct me afterwards. And there may be people here who would like to continue the conversation and help me develop this into some sort of paper that we can publish on the ISCAST website, or where I can offer to do talks like this in other places. So if I start on page 1, I'll be much better off than starting on page 2. So I do have some notes here, and as you can see, I've got some slides as well. So we'll see how we go. And there you have a quotation. Well, it's actually a quotation from me, but I'm combining a couple of ideas that people have suggested. That anybody who lives to the year 2050 has a good chance of living forever. That's the claim of the AI transhumanist ideologues, that by the time we get to 2050, we will be able to do a number of things that will enable human beings to live forever. So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. First of all, what are we going to talk about today? Well, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, transhumanism, often used by the transhumanists themselves, using that symbol, H+. No, it's not a hydrogen ion. Cognitive extension and the singularity. They're all terms that you may have come across some of those terms. You will come across all of those terms. So I'll introduce you to what they mean roughly. We'll talk about what the big issues might be. We'll talk about some theological questions, and then we'll talk about life everlasting. The reality is that you are the AI transhumanist generation. You're also the climate change generation. You're the generation that's going to live to see possibly the end of this century, and you will be able to look back at your lives. If you don't live forever on this earth, you will be able to look back at your lives and see what the human race did with climate change, with artificial intelligence, and I'm not just talking about Siri, as well as with the global cultural, ideological, religious tensions that we live with today. The rise of radical Islam, for example, where's that going to go? The rise of China, where's that going to go? And you are fortunate enough to be able to say you will probably look back at this century and see you'll see new things on the horizon, but you'll see what's happened about those big issues. I am not. These issues have always interested human beings, and it's for a long, long time we've been talking about these issues. Now, I know that people of your generation don't necessarily read a lot of books, but you probably know the titles of 1984, written when? 1939, I think I might have the date here. 1949. So George Orwell's 1984 was written in 1949. Aldous Huxley's Brave New World was written in 1931. Frankenstein, written by Mary Shelley, was written in 1818. These are all books that are touching on the issues that, if you haven't read the books, you've seen some of the movies. You've seen some of the movies that talk about the surveillance society, the things, the medical technology, the pace at which medical technology is moving towards what we're going to call transhumanism. AI now, I think I have another slide. AI is here now. It's here with Siri. It's here with the enormous computing power that allows us to mimic human decisions. That is to say, I said before that it's artificial intelligence. It's not human intelligence, but it appears to be human intelligence because it's doing things that humans can do, but much faster. Particularly in the world of the internet, where we have enormous amounts of data out there. Data mining now in the last 10, 15 years has become a very significant activity in order to draw together the data. For example, how much data about you is out there in cyberspace that if somebody decides they want to find out all they can about you, they can develop a pretty significant profile unless you've been one of those people who deliberately tries to avoid cyberspace. But the fact is, if you drive a car, then your driver's licence is out there somewhere, which means your photo is out there somewhere, and your date of birth is out there somewhere, even if you've never put your Visa card in, or gone online on Facebook, or set up Gmail accounts. The information is out there to be mined for those that decide they want to mine it. And of course, Facebook is an example of making use of data mining, and you've given Facebook permission to mine your data and therefore to know an awful lot about you. Artificial intelligence. Intelligence because it appears to understand, it appears to make decisions. We have automated decision making. It takes vast amounts of data, processes it and then makes a decision. Trading on the share market has been around for quite a long time. Simply computer programs, mathematical relations that say if this happens, then this happens, taking big amounts of information and then buying or selling automatically on the share market. Driverless cars, the same thing. The car, quote, makes a decision. Replacing human decisions and making decisions a lot faster, but makes a decision based on the parameters that have been put into the car, based on the values that have been put into the car. What is the value of the life of a bicycle rider versus saving the lives of the occupants of the car? What are the statistical chances of the occupants of the car dying if the car swerves? All of these things have to be built into the programming of a driverless car, or driverless Boeing 737 MAX 8s, where a computer program takes over flying the aeroplane because, and this is assuming that the stories are true, that we roughly know what happened, because the human beings weren't able to respond in time, hypothetically. The human beings were making a mistake, hypothetically, probably based on false instrumentation, and therefore the computer takes over and tries to pull the nose of the plane down. The pilots can't control it, don't know how to stop the computer doing what it's doing, and so we've lost 2 MAX 8s in the last year, and now that fleet is virtually grounded around the world. I saw recently, although it's from 2017, a BBC 5-minute video. You can look it up there. I'm happy to send these slides to people. Or I've also put in short links that are easy to remember, like bit.ly, China Surveillance BBC, where a reporter goes to China in a city about the size of Melbourne, Guiyang, I think it's called, and the police show him their surveillance network. There's a big surveillance network. They take his driver's licence, they get the photo of his driver's licence, he disappears into the city, and from the word go, it takes the police 7 minutes to pick him up. That is to say, it took the police 7 minutes to find him because of the surveillance cameras in that city recognising his face from his driver's licence. It can happen there. China's working very hard so that it will happen anywhere in China, but no doubt, maybe, I don't have any doubts, maybe China's working very hard to build a database of the whole world, and who knows how much information is getting into the Chinese database through smartphones, through other surveillance means around the world. I have another example that I'm going to get to later. But so far we're talking about artificial intelligence. We're talking about machines doing things that human beings could hypothetically do, but much faster. Then you go the next step, you go to machine learning. You go to the idea, well, wait on, we don't just have to program these machines to do a particular task. What if we program the machines to reprogram themselves so that the machines become smarter? And there I've got a quotation there. Rather than teaching computers and machines how to do everything, it'd be far more efficient to code them to think like a human being and then plug them into the internet to give them access to all of the information in the world. Bold claim. I won't talk about cognitive extension very much, except to say the idea of cognitive extension is the idea that our thinking is actually done not just inside our brains. You might say, for some mathematicians, they can't think without a pencil and pen, for example. The pencil and pen actually becomes an extension of their thinking powers. You might work out other ways that we extend not only our thinking powers, but our bodily powers as well. If you are a skilled musician, you will know that when you're playing your musical instrument, you are not thinking about the pressure of the finger and the position of the fingers. If you are, then you're a beginner, because you go way past that so that the musical instrument becomes a part of you, an extension of your body, just as our hands and fingers are an extension of who I am. But I won't talk about that anymore. I will move on to the singularity. The singularity is an idea that is promoted particularly by ideologues of the transhumanist variety. The singularity is this idea that artificial intelligence will stop being artificial. That is to say, it will become real intelligence. That the machines won't just be mimicking human intelligence, even to the point where we don't recognise that they're mimicking, but they will actually be intelligent. Now, what that means is a deeply philosophical question, but the point is that there's a point where they will no longer be artificial. So we'll have what some people are calling super intelligent machines or machines with human level intelligence. and we get the point where we get a human-computer interface where humans and computers are working together. These are ideas that some people anyway, and some very rich people, are pursuing with a great deal of enthusiasm. Quote, Ray Kurzweil, senior engineer at Google. This leads to computers having human intelligence, outputting them inside our brains, computers inside our brains, connecting them to the cloud, expanding who we are. Today, that's not just a future scenario. It's here in part, and it's going to accelerate. We're going to get more neocortex. We're going to be funnier. We're going to be better at music. We're going to be sexier. We're really going to exemplify all the things that we value in humans to a greater degree. Now, if you're thinking critically about that, you'll hear there's a whole mix of science moving into values and moral judgments about what's better and what's not better. The assumption being that we know what is better, we know what we want, there's nothing wrong with it, therefore we can do whatever we can to arrive there. Elon Musk of Tesla fame is promoting the idea of a neural lace. That is to say, a direct connection between the brain and the internet. After all, why do we have to use these keyboards and screens and all the rest of it? And I think the next quotation talks about that. A guy who has invested $100 million on a neural prosthesis to do just that. Our connection with our new creations of intelligence is limited by screens, keyboards, gestural interfaces and voice commands, constrained input-output modalities. We have very little access to our own brains, limiting our ability to co-evolve with silicon-based machines in powerful ways. Therefore, let's overcome all of this stuff. Let's just plug ourselves in somehow so that I don't need to use a voice command to talk to Siri. I just connect to the internet somehow, and anything Siri can tell me, I can find out, quote, for myself by being connected in a much more direct way. And so you get the promotion of transhumanism, the idea that we can overcome human limitations. We have evolved to the point we are so far, and now we have within our power the possibility of taking control of our evolution. And there I gave you an example before in The Titan, which is not a great movie really, but it's a movie about transhumanism, about deliberately genetically changing this human being so that the human being can survive on Titan in a methane atmosphere and all the rest of it. So transhumanism is about taking over from evolution. It crosses the boundary from therapy to enhancement. So far, medicine has been dedicated, for the most part, to therapeutic ends, to fixing things that are clearly wrong. We're now getting to the point where we can enhance human beings, and we need to decide what we're going to do about that. I'm going to talk about CRISPR somewhere, but I'm not sure where I was meant to talk about CRISPR. I might have got past CRISPR. No, I'm going to talk about CRISPR on the next slide. So it's about improvement. It's about living better and living longer, perhaps forever. So this is a secular version of the desire for life everlasting. From Genesis, the creation of humanity, and this is very good, we move to we can do better than this. We can do better than God, and a moral commitment on the part of some to say that this is what we ought to do, not just that we can, but that we ought. And there I've got I'm suggesting a distinction between artificial intelligence and transhumanism. This is just to help see the lie of the land. I'm suggesting that artificial intelligence is about more and faster, but transhumanism then becomes better. And we have this image of what a better human being is, and we're aiming to enhance ourselves to that. So transhumanism offers 3 options probably for everlasting life. It offers a medical technology option, that is to say, anti-aging possibilities, you know, doing something to the cells of our bodies to prevent them aging, replacing body bits as we need to. We replace knees and a whole lot of other things now, hearts even. I remember the first heart transplant, and what a huge cultural thing it was when this doctor called Christian Barnard in South Africa transplanted a human heart. This wasn't just, you know, sort of putting in a metal knee. This sort of thing, in the foreseeable future, apart from our brain, we could replace one way or another all the bits of our bodies. Genetic therapy to overcome cell aging. We're now working on 3D biological printers to be able to print organs of the human body. So the idea is, hypothetically, again, you put all the right details in, the genetic code and all the raw materials in, and you get a biological printer to print a new liver for the person who needs the new liver, for example. CRISPR, some of you will have come across CRISPR if you've done a bit of science in the last 2 years. CRISPR is the technology that very roughly is a cut and paste mechanism for the human genome. So the human genome, all the information that maps who we are, the human genome has only been mapped in the last 15 years, 2003 I think. And if you don't know Francis Collins' story, it's worth chasing it up. And his book, The Language of God. Francis Collins was head of the Human Genome Project, committed Christian, and is now head of the National Institutes of Health in the United States. So he's a very high-profile evangelical Christian and world top scientist, and has written his story in the book called The Language of God. So CRISPR allows us to cut and paste the human genome. Hypothetically, again, because there are lots of scientific blocks to these things, hypothetically, if there were a gene for intelligence, and there isn't, and it doesn't look like we'll ever be able to identify one, if there were a gene for intelligence, then you could cut and paste one person's bit of genetic material that relates to intelligence and replace it with somebody else's, for example. Now, doing that with eye colour or something like that might be relatively easy. Doing that for intelligence is pretty unlikely for various reasons that Phil Batterham will tell you about. If you go to the ISCAST website, you'll find an article by Phil Batterham. He's a Melbourne Uni geneticist, and he's also the president of the International Genetics Association, and a Christian guy who will talk about why intelligence doesn't quite work that way in the human genome. Anyway, CRISPR gives us this ability to cut and paste the human genome. And once again, I think I've lost my way. No, I haven't. Okay, so that's one way you can live forever. Medical technology, roughly as we know it. Another way that you can live forever, based on a certain understanding of the human brain, is that you will simply be able to dump your brain into an android body. That is to say, take the robot body with its massive hard drive capacity, and you dump all the information in your brain into the hard drive capacity of that android, and that android becomes you. What happens if you copy the information in your brain and paste it into this android, and into that android too, and into that one? Then I guess we've got 3 yous. So that's another way of living forever. You could, for example, hire an android in Paris this afternoon and zap your all the information that makes you you to Paris, put it in that android, and spend time looking at Notre Dame Cathedral or something else that you can get closer to, like the Eiffel Tower, and then come back this afternoon and drop yourself into another android body back at home. That's another way where, hypothetically, we can live to forever, and I will be coming back to that in terms of the realities of that. The other thing is a brain upload. Simply leave your brain in the cloud and live in the cloud and live effectively in a virtual world. There you are in the cloud. This isn't even the Matrix. The Matrix, the brain was still there, living in a real world that the brain didn't know about. This is living in the cloud. There's no need for a body. And then once again, you can ask various questions about, if my brain's in the cloud, what does that mean? I'm on this server somewhere, but we all know servers are backed up, aren't they? So Google backs up its servers however many times. So however many times it does, there will be however many of me around the world in the cloud. Well, there are some big issues here. There are some big scientific issues, that is to say, the issues of what of this is pure fiction and never going to be possible, and what of it is sort of scientific reality. Where does reality end and where does the hype begin? There is also a commitment to a particular model of the human being, isn't there? There is a particular model of the human being that, to put it bluntly and to spoil one of my punchlines a bit later on, is heretical. That is to say that the human being can be a human being without a body. There is an image of a human being that says what goes on in here, inside the brain, is pure information, complicated, but pure information which could be mapped in some way and therefore replicated in some way or downloaded in some way. And the rest of it is superfluous to the information in that body. That's got various problems. It's got theological problems, it's got philosophical problems, it's got scientific problems. Scientific problems because we're really wondering, some people are really wondering seriously about whether our brain is actually an extended brain. That is to say, the brain is not just here, but is our whole neural system, and you can't just cut off the rest of the neural system without actually cutting into the brain, if you like. So that's one scientific aspect of it. But it faces philosophical problems as well, philosophical problems that are not yet religious problems. Philosophical problems particularly pushed by a philosopher in Canberra called David. Yeah, right. I know his name very well. Anyway, and he calls it the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem of consciousness is basically the idea summed up in a philosophical article that's really quite famous now by Hilary Putnam called What Is It Like to Be a Bat? And Putnam said, one day we will know all there is, this is my paraphrase, one day we will know all there is about what it's like to be a bat. We will know everything that there is to know about the bat's brain. But when we know all that, we still won't know what it's like to be a bat. That is to say, there is an aspect of consciousness that apparently goes beyond the brain. So this is the argument that philosophers are having, without bringing into it any religious convictions. So it's the argument about the mind and the brain. Is the mind equal to the brain, or is the mind more than the brain? Now, in a very secular sort of environment, it's pretty hard to use the word soul or anything that remotely sounds supernatural. And if you're committed to a natural view, pure naturalism, then you've got to say, then you're pretty committed to the idea that the mind is the brain, and that there is a simple overlap. They're different words covering different aspects of the same thing. But if you want to know about my mind, you will look inside my head, my brain. That's the presumption that a lot of this is based on. I'm also going to make a couple of theological comments about it afterwards. But this also raises ethical questions. You know some of the ethical questions already about the surveillance society, about privacy, about concentration of power in what I've called a multi-value world. That is to say, a world where there is not agreement about what we should do with this information, and a world where science and technology take us forward so fast and we're having so much trouble keeping up. Witness the difficulty of legislating for what Facebook and Google are doing today. That is to say, legislation is way behind because Facebook and Google are doing things with people's permission, for the most part, for some part anyway, are doing things that we don't know how to manage in a legal framework. And therefore they've got away with things for a number of years that lawmakers are only just trying to catch up with now. What else? Okay, so again, this week the New York Times spent $70 to subscribe to a facial recognition software program that you can do online, that you or I could do online. It also harvested the stream of video from a location in New York City where the video feed is fed online so that people can look and see if there are, I think it's so that they can look and see if there are lots of people skating on the lake or there are lots of people in the restaurant or whatever. So it's a public video feed, like the video feeds of our beaches so that surfers can tell how big the waves are. It's a public video feed. New York Times downloaded or stored the video feed for 24 hours. They then got information that was publicly available off, for example, university websites, photos of people. They matched this with that, paid $70 to do it, and they matched up who was there. University professor from such and such a university had lunch at this time, at this table, they met with this person, etc. That was all information that was in the public realm, and it cost them $70 simply by facial recognition. And then they went and found university professor, and he's the famous one because he's the one that they decided to pick on, and he gave them permission to tell the story. And then so they interview him about how he feels about it. There you can see the story at that link. Another thing that is already happening is that chips are being implanted in workers in some factories, in some office buildings factories, so that workers can be tracked, so that they can get in and out of the building without having a plastic card. And you can think of where that might go. Again, there's a link there. So these things are happening. They raise issues of power, who makes the rules, who controls the data, and they raise issues about competing ethical frameworks for what should be done. If you don't know C.S. Lewis's book called The Abolition of Man, I highly recommend it. It is an excellent book thinking about what happens as we live in a more and more multi-ethical framework sort of context, and who makes the rules. And C.S. Lewis's conclusion is that the direction we're heading will result in what he calls the abolition of man. And you can have a look at why he says that. And of course, the other issue, which I've already touched on, is the issue of moving from therapy to enhancement. I want to be better than well. I want to be better than well. I don't just want to be well, I want to be a better human being. What is a better human being? More intelligent, taller, shorter, wider, narrower, whatever. Specifically, theological issues. Well, I'm going to mention a couple. One, I'm going to mention two old heresies, Pelagianism and Gnosticism. Pelagianism is the idea, it's been around a long time, like about 1800 years, 1900 years. It's the idea that basically we can be perfect without the grace of God. That if we try hard enough, we can be perfect. So sin is not something inherent, but rather something we do and something we can overcome. Sometimes one version of it goes under the name of sinless perfectionism. And there have been Christians even here in Melbourne, who have gone down that line. The idea that basically if you try hard enough, you can live a day without sin sort of thing. And if you're really good, you could live 2 days and you could keep on going and you could actually, under your own steam, be sinless. Today's not a theological lecture or a Bible study. Suffice to say that Orthodox Christianity for 2,000 years has rejected that view and said that no, unless God works in us, we do not have the power to live sinlessly. Now, this is... But this idea that human beings are basically sinless, and where they do things that are problematic, they can be sorted out. These things can be sorted out, even to the point of genetically changing human beings so that they can be sorted out. And I think I might have skipped that bit, but I was going to talk to you about... I was going to talk to you about Savulescu, and I haven't... Don't tell me I skipped Savulescu. Okay, Julian Savulescu is he's actually an Australian. He comes out of Monash Uni, and a particular strand of philosophy at Monash Uni, a utilitarian strand of philosophy that's got itself into trouble by being very bold about making its statements about, particularly about human beings and the nature of human beings. Peter Singer is one of those sort of people who speak this sort of utilitarian language. Speciesism, which is one of Singer's terms, is one of the sort of catchwords of this stream, who say, for example, why would you privilege a human baby over an adult chimpanzee just on the basis of species? That would be speciesism. So this is practical ethics, and it's at the cutting edge, pushing for things that in the past, in the interests of philosophical bravery, pushing for things that have been in the past seen to be abhorrent. So Savulescu says, what we need to do is we need to genetically engineer human beings so that they will not do the appalling things that science and technology is soon to give us the power to do. It won't be long before somebody can commit ultimate harm. Ultimate harm isn't just putting a suicide vest on. Ultimate harm is when somebody gets control of the global system of nuclear weapons and decides that they really don't like the human race and they want to blow up the planet. The hypothetical situation being, we are heading to the point where we can't prevent that sort of possibility. And what we need to do, and climate change is an example of ultimate harm, but it's a long, slow, drawn-out example. And these practical ethicists say, Savulescu particularly, says what we need to do is, it would be a good thing to genetically engineer human beings so that they wouldn't do such things. In other words, you decide what is the good and you genetically engineer human beings in order to do exactly that. Now, I was going to talk more about that, but I won't now, because I want to move on to Gnosticism. Gnosticism, again, a very early heresy, came about maybe in the first century, probably in the first century. The idea being that we are made up of body and soul, but what's important is the soul. The body is just a container for the soul, and the body really doesn't matter. Now that led, in terms of the ethics of the body, it leads in two directions. It leads to either you effectively reject the body and try and minimise the body altogether and just live in the spiritual, soulful realm, which makes you an ascetic, or what you do with your body doesn't matter, and therefore it makes you a libertarian. You can do what you like with your body, particularly sexual ethics, of course. Do what you like with your body because that doesn't affect your soul. And Christianity very early on said, no, that's a heresy. We are an integrated body and soul. I'm not using Christian language so much, but we are an integrated. The reason I'm struggling is because I don't want to offer a dualist view of the human body, because I think the body-soul thing is a dualist view where you separate the two things. I don't think that's a Christian view either. So somehow or other we have to talk about an integrated thing that is the body-soul or the body-mind or something like that. But you can see the transhumanist idea is, well, your body doesn't matter. What matters is the information. And if you could take the information out and put it in another body, then that would be fine. That's not a Christian idea. And the Gnostic idea is also that the key to salvation is knowledge. What you need is the right knowledge. And if you have the right knowledge, then you will find salvation. And there I've got a quotation, haven't I? Transhumanism, in all its hubris, somebody said, I think, yeah, that's quoting a theologian in the States, relies on a retooled Gnostic heresy that's very prevalent today. The belief that the mind is the permanent self and the body is changeable and can therefore be divided with no consequences. Again, an un-Christian idea about the body. Specifically, I'm running out of time, the big issue about all of this stuff is we have to answer the question what it means to be human. Christianity has answers to what it means to be human, answers that fly in the face of much of the assumptions of extreme artificial intelligence transhumanist ideas. We have a view that the body is integral to who we are. We look forward to the resurrection of the body, not just the resurrection of the soul. Jesus' body mattered. We have a view of sin, that we are rooted in sin, and there is only one way of dealing with sin, and that is not by using CRISPR to sort of cut out the sinful bits of our genome. There is only one way of dealing with sin, and there is only one means of redemption, and that is through Jesus Christ. We are in need of redemption, as some of these people think. We are in need of redemption, but there is only one means of redemption according to Christian faith. And we have a view about life everlasting, and it's not the sort of life everlasting that these people can imagine, nor the sort of life everlasting that we can imagine, probably. But we do have a commitment to a view about life everlasting. The pursuit of life everlasting is not a bad thing in itself, all other things considered, but the means by which we pursue life everlasting is the question to be asked. Now, I'm going to stop there. Once again, it's been a bit of all over the place, but what comments do you have? What questions